Welcome to Verses to Live By. My name is Hobie McMahan. I am the Gloucester Campus Pastor here at Liberty Live Church. When we talked about verses to live by, I immediately had so many thoughts of what to do. We did a series just a few weeks back called This Is My Story, and I was able to share then just a life verse that I live by as Genesis 50:20. And Genesis 50:20, it's Joseph is talking to his brothers, and they're talking about Joseph and the situation he's in. They're a little bit fearful of him after their father passes away, as he is in power in Egypt, and he has to tell him. He says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph understood that even in the midst of a rough time, in a stormy time when things are happening to him, that God intended it for good. He saw his plan throughout. And that's a verse that I've always lived by. And it's one that I've constantly went back to as things happen, you can look to see that maybe I don't know what God's doing right now, but I know that he has a plan. And so with that, even though I had shared that before, I was like, well, there's other verses that have meant so much to me. But this verse was foundational for me. And to give you some background, I was the children's pastor at our York River campus in Williamsburg for about 3.5 years. Loved doing ministry there. In October of 2019, Pastor Grant, he called for a staff meeting. And we know when Pastor Grant calls for a staff meeting, it's going to be something pretty great, regardless of what he talks about. But I think some of us knew that, hey, this could be a campus announcement, as he talked about it's going to be for future things. So we go to the staff meeting. There's anticipation, there's excitement, there's people waiting on this campus announcement, and he starts to talk about the mission and vision that God has for Liberty, of reaching the 1.8 million in Hampton Roads. And as he's talking about it, he talks about an opportunity that's come up. And, with opportunity, when you hear that word, you get excited. And he announces a 6th campus here at Liberty. And when he talks about Gloucester. And I didn't know much about Gloucester at that time. I knew where it was located, and I think I had went there once for Scoot's barbecue, and that was about it. And he talks about how it was going to be at the high school, and there was going to be set up and tear down each week, but God was going to really move in it. And as I'm hearing about this, of course it's exciting, but I lean over to my wife, Hannah, who was also there at the meeting, and I said, man, I feel bad for the staff that's going to have to set up and tear down there every week. And she kind of laughs and is like, yeah, that's a great point. And I don't think much more about it. It doesn't really come up in my mind. And so that weekend I was doing my daily Bible reading and prayer times. And I'm praying there. I'm getting alone with the Lord. And Gloucester comes up in my prayers as I was praying for it. But I felt just something, just a nudging, if you will, towards the Gloucester campus, and start thinking about the campus pastor role of who's going to fill it. And it was almost in my spirit, I could feel God just pushing me towards that position. And I'm not going to lie, I shrugged it off. I had excuses in store. I was, oh no, too young, too inexperienced. I'm just a children's pastor. No, I'm not fit for that. I'm not good enough. I had excuse after excuse, and every time I prayed, it would come up. And so I get through the weekend, and I had wrestled with this, but I just kept kind of just shoving it away. And so we hit Monday morning staff meeting that we would do at our campus. And so our campus pastor, John Dickerson, for this meeting, he wanted to do something a little different. He wanted to play a sermon video from one of his favorite churches. And there's a guest speaker, and he starts talking, and he's talking about prayer. And anytime there's a talk about prayer, my ears, I really like to listen in on prayer. It means a lot to me. And the title of the message was Praying Big Prayers. And I listened to every single word this man said about praying big prayers and remembering of how big our God is. And so that week, I really wanted to commit to praying big prayers, to thinking about all that God can do. And I really wanted to focus in on my ministry and all the things that God could do through me, not because of me, but because of him. And as I was praying these big prayers, Gloucester continued to come up over and over again. And I was wrestling with it so much throughout that whole week. And he puts a verse in front of me, John 3:30. It is a short verse, but it meant a lot. John 3:30 says, he must increase, but I must decrease. And the context of this verse is it is at the same time, there's John the Baptist's ministry and Jesus' ministry. Jesus had already been baptized by him, and John the Baptist had paved the way for Jesus. And so what happens in the context of this verse is that John's disciples come up to him and they say, hey, why are all these people going to Jesus? I mean, you're the one that baptized him. And John has such a great response. He's basically saying, it's okay, because I've prepared the way for Christ, for the Savior. And he must increase, but I must decrease. Pretty much meaning he's the one who should be getting all the attention. He's the one who should be doing this, because his way is the way. And as this verse continues to go before me, I'm just amazed. All the doubts that I have, I'm having to wrestle with over and over again. And I think, well, too young, Jesus has the wisdom. Too inexperienced, Jesus will give direction. Not good enough, Jesus is good enough for all. And so many of these doubts, I had to decide I cannot be like Moses, who gave so many different excuses, because if God truly wants to move, he'll do it. And he will equip those that he calls, regardless of what season you're in. And you would think that after all of that, I would be good. There'd be nothing else to wrestle with. But I wish I could say I was good. I get into that weekend and I decide to talk to my campus pastor, John Dickerson. And I tell him all that's going on. I'm fully transparent. Here's my doubts. Here's what I'm wrestling with. And he tells me, he looks me in the eye and said, Hobie, I've been praying for you in this, because I do believe that God's calling you in it. I hadn't mentioned it to him at all until that weekend, and he had been praying for it. And again, you would think I would be good, but still wrestling with it. Then the next Monday morning staff meeting hits. We play the next message. It's a 2-part series. This is the second message. And what is it about? How our doubts get in the way of our prayers. That was when I was good. No more doubts. I knew God was calling me to pursue this leadership role, this campus pastor role. Regardless of any doubt I had, I knew that God was enough. And so I called Pastor Grant, and come to find out, he had been praying that God would call somebody to this position. One thing to think about is, even when God calls you to do something, and when you're obedient, it doesn't mean it is going to be an easy ride. Even though God had called me to be in this campus pastor position for the launch of this campus, there were things to learn. There were things to grow in. I'm working towards so many different avenues. And we were going to launch in February of 2020. And through things, you have to look at it as really God's providence. More than anything, that launch had to be moved. And so when you first hear that, you think, man, I was really hoping that we would launch. I mean, that's just less time to reach people. We could have reached people now, but God had a plan. Because the following month, March 2020, as many of you know, the COVID-19 pandemic. We enter into this new phase. And all of a sudden, all these plans that you have of how to reach people, of what to do, it gets turned upside down. People are fearful. You're working out how do you connect with somebody when they're going to be at home. They don't want you coming to their door. There's so much fear going on. And so we start to plan events. We start to plan things to do, informational type events. I don't know, one of the common jokes in Gloucester, even to this day, is anything that we plan outside is going to get rained out the first time. It has happened probably a solid 8 times at this point. It's been over and over. And that's what happened about all summer long. We continued to see just difficulty after difficulty. And we planned a fall festival, and it rained out the first time. So we said, okay, second week we can do this. And the second week, well, a certain mandate was made that, could only have 25 people get together outside. We had to cancel it then. So it was time after time, we really had to lean on God on how to impact a community. In the midst of this time, you know that people are hurting. You know that people need to find God, that they need a support system, that they need discipleship. There's this picture that I would see when it comes to COVID. It's an iceberg. And it could just be, somebody who's isolated, but underneath the surface, it's all these feelings. It can be depression. It could be alcohol or drug abuse. It could be just loneliness. There could be other addictions that are happening. And it's so hard to reach people when they don't necessarily want to be reached because of fear. So we had to work it out. How do we, as a new launching campus, get in this community and allow people to know that we are there for them? So that's why I say there were situations there that would happen over and over again to where we truly had to rely on God and His sovereignty and His plan. We'd looked to launching in August of 2020. Well, as we got closer, we realized as COVID-19 had begun to affect more of our area and numbers were starting to go up, that it wasn't the best time to launch. But in the midst of all of those things, of all the trials and all the tribulations, and focusing in that God truly did have a plan, I believe that you can go back to the verse that I talked about back in the beginning. That's Genesis 50:20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And I'm happy to say that in January, this past January, we launched the campus. And God did an amazing work. And this is by no means a pat on my back. It is all because of Him. And on Easter Sunday, we had 11 baptisms. That is all God. He must increase, but I must decrease. Such a powerful verse. One of my favorite quotes is, be obedient and leave the consequences to God. God may be calling you in something. He might be bringing it up in you to do something, and all you have to do is be obedient. You're going to have doubts. You're going to have things that get in the way. My doubts were, you think about it, it's understandable. I look around, I think they do a better job than me. I think they do, but you look at it, but it was God that was enough. So just remembering that God is enough in your situation and whatever He's calling you to do. Strive for that obedience. Strive to know Him more. Draw closer to God. Do not be anxious. Do not be afraid. These are the things that I learned from this situation alone. And all of that to say, this is a verse that I live by. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a great night.